You ever had a coach that sounded a little something like this?
Hips! Hips! Come on, Joey, hips! 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 Hips!
I'm gonna kill this guy.
Hips! 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 Oh, yeah, come on!
Alright guys, today we're going to go over what your coach means when they use the cue hips, lead with your hips, or drive with your hip. Now there are certainly a few different moves hips could apply to, but today we're just going to be talking about hip drive in the low bar squat. So we'll talk about what hip drive is, how to do it, and then we'll also look at a few video examples of what it looks like and some common problems you might run into. Simply put, hip drive is just leading up with your hips as you ascend out of the bottom of a squat, and I specifically say up with your hips, and we'll talk about why that's important in a second. Now all this is doing is allowing us to load up our posterior chain in its most advantageous position possible, and it's also going to allow us to maintain that bar position over midfoot, allowing us to ascend out of the squat in our strongest position possible. So how do we actually do hip drive? In words, it's pretty simple. Obviously putting it into practice, a little bit harder, but in words, it's just leading up in the ascent with your hips, maintaining your back angle, and then also keeping our knees forward while we lead up with our hips. Like I said, a little bit easier said than done, but all it really comes down to is timing. So if we lead with our torso first out of the bottom of the squat, we're not going to be able to utilize hip drive, and likewise on the flip side, if we lead up with our hips too much, we're going to end up having to basically lower back extension the rest of the weight up, leading to the good morning squat. So we're really just aiming for that kind of Goldilocks situation where we're right in between both of them, right in between the squat without hip drive and right in between the good morning squat. We'll check out some examples here to see what's going on. This first squat here is an example of a squat without any hip drive, and this is usually the case when an individual is eager to lead with their torso and return to an upright position as they're coming out of the bottom of the hole. Now, this isn't really going to put you in any sort of injury risk. We are losing out on some power output though. In this squat, we aren't able to really maintain that bar over midfoot position, and in conjunction with this, we aren't going to be able to fully utilize the muscles of our posterior chain, leaving us with a weaker squat overall. Our second example here is what a squat actually looks like with hip drive. So we initiate descent out of the hole with an upward hip motion, not a backward hip motion, and we maintain our torso angle the entire time to properly load up that posterior chain as we drive ourselves out of the hole. So this motion is, like I said, that kind of Goldilocks situation where the timing for your hip drive has to be just right and end up between a squat with no hip drive and that good morning squat. But don't worry, the more you practice with this, the easier timing is going to get for it, to the point that you're not even going to have to think about it. And then finally, we'll just take a look at the other end of the spectrum here, and this is what a good morning squat will end up looking like. And this is just the result of leading with the hips too much, or more correctly, leading with your hips in a backwards direction. So if our hips shoot up early in the movement, the net result is going to be that our knees are going to be locked out early in the movement, and we're left about halfway up and then have to finish the movement with our lower back. So it's not going to be so hot for our lower back there. So if the good morning squat kind of ends up being the position we find ourselves in, there's two ways we kind of right ourselves. And the first is just to mentally think about your hip shooting up instead of your hip shooting back and then up. So hip shoot up, and that's going to get you in the mindset to kind of drive up instead of drive back. So the other thing we want to keep in mind here if we are hitting a good morning squat is actually our knees. And now I know it's a hip drive, but the knees are going to determine where our hips are actually ending up going. So we want to keep those knees driven forward while we initiate that hip drive up. If you shoot those knees back early on in the movement, your hips are going to be forced to kind of shoot out back behind you, and they're really going to have nowhere else to go if you're driving your knees back as you start the movement. Alright guys, that's it. I want to keep this nice and simple and quick. I know this is kind of a topic that can kind of get lost in translation between coach and athlete, so I hope this video kind of helps solve out that problem and you now know what your coach is talking about. So things to keep in mind here is our hips go up, not backing out, and then also our knees stay forward. After that, all that it is timing and practice, practice, practice. I promise this movement gets easier over time, and once you feel that sort of solid position and drive out of the bottom of the hole, it's going to be well worth it. So just keep at it and you will 100% get it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope Hipdrive makes a little more sense now. And thank you guys so much for watching. Hope to catch you all in the next video. I'll see you guys.